So it looks like the warmonger Johnny Bolton has come out of the woodwork to criticize the ICC for issuing arrest warrants for the leadership of Hamas and Israel. His basic argument is, nah, you can't enforce anything against our proxy states, or let alone us. Should we really be surprised if someone who's been accused of multiple war crimes, including torture, thinks the ICC is illegitimate? So let's listen to the comic book villain with the Monopoly Man looking mustache tell us why the ICC is wrong.
What's really illegitimate here is the International Criminal Court itself. It's a fantasy. It's a piece of government, not a whole government, a piece of government floating around in the international ether, unchecked by executive or legislative power, utterly unable to enforce its judgments. This is another example, because what this rogue prosecutor, this utterly unaccountable court is doing here against Israel, they're going to do against us soon enough.
Okay, how about you just don't commit war crimes? People would argue that John Bolton is a war criminal, and it's interesting that CNN decided to bring an accused war criminal onto CNN to talk about the ICC being illegitimate, but putting that aside, Israel has acted in a way in this war that has showed that they care about civilian casualties in the sense of, I think if the rest of the world wasn't here, I think they would just level Gaza. What I believe what Israel is doing, which is inexcusable, is blocking humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza on the chance that Hamas might steal some of the humanitarian aid. And that is illegal under international law to deprive a civilian population of food, water, and electricity. You can't do that. And Israel has blatantly been doing it. And I don't think there's a moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Hamas embeds itself into civilian populations on purpose in order to maximize civilian casualties, but not allowing power into Gaza and causing babies in incubators to die. I feel safe to say that that is wrong.
No, I'm saying it's wrong to go after any. This court is not the body to prosecute anybody. The court has also indicted Vladimir Putin in connection with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's the wrong way to do it too. You can't. The charge of moral equivalence gives legitimacy to the court. In effect, if they indict really bad guys, they're in favor of it. Utterly unaccountable prosecutor didn't make any trade-off at all. And I think people should ask, does this now make settling the conflict in the Middle East easier or harder? It won't matter to the prosecutor because he'll never be held responsible for it.
And the defense minister, Gallant, is in this ICC warrant, and he is openly opposing Netanyahu, saying, we do not want Israeli troops occupying Gaza. It's risky, and we need to have some sort of post-war plans in order to create another government to replace Hamas and give the Palestinians an alternative rather than just choosing violence. And after October 7th, I can understand politicians and even military officials making outlandish statements, but I just can't get behind blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza and starving a civilian population. You're using food as a weapon of war.
What does that mean for Israel's allies who are parties to this court, and they're technically supposed to arrest them if they travel and they have an ICC warrant?
Well, it should be a wake-up call to them that they've stepped into a very dangerous territory here. And I think this is the sort of thing that U.S. officials need to worry about in particular. The one silver lining in this cloud, when you look at the self-righteous, grandstanding, publicity-seeking prosecutor there, I think this is the ICC digging its grave in this country. I think I would be happy to predict right here, I don't think the U.S. is going to join the ICC because the targets of this prosecutor are fundamentally irrational. To proceed against a free, law-abiding, democratic society in the way that it did shows it's not tethered to a rule of law itself.
I find it interesting that he even said that because I'm sure there's a lot of Americans who would be all for prosecuting the war crimes of the Bush administration. Where torture used to be illegal, all of a sudden torture became a difference of opinion. Of course the United States won't want to join the ICC because they would actually have to check our asses for violating international law. Also, you can throw John Bolton and Dick Cheney in that group too.
Ambassador, when you look at this, there is growing criticism of how Israel has conducted this war. I mean, do you believe that Israel has upheld international law since October 7th?
I haven't heard legitimate charges that it hasn't, and I think there's been a lot of hype propaganda. One very important point, just to prove that.
There's a lot of
dead
civilians.
The United Nations,
a lot of dead Palestinians.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. The United Nations just cut in half the number of women and children it reports killed in the Gaza conflict. Now, this is the United Nations accepting now the figures of the Hamas Ministry of Health as opposed to the Hamas Information Office. But the fact is that the total number of casualties and the number particularly of women and children killed has been out of whack. The UN, by its shift, concedes that numbers that have been used on women and children have been double what even another part of Hamas says. And I think this is a media problem too, if I may say so.
Okay, first off, Israel's not letting independent journalists in to actually go and try to verify these numbers. Also, Antony Blinken came out recently and he said Israel has taken actions that are not considered legal under international law. So when soldiers actually commit war crimes, you can't say that it's government policy to commit war crimes. If you ask me, do I think Israel is deliberately targeting civilians? No. The numbers don't show that. However, I don't think Israel cares much about winning the hearts and minds of the Palestinians, which they're going to have to do at some point in order to offer an alternative to the Palestinians than the government of Hamas.
Even if you are skeptical of that figure, as we've seen even President Biden express skepticism, we do know that a lot of women and children and Palestinian civilians have been killed.
Let's take that. The question in conflict, in urban conflict, which the United States itself has faced as recently as Iraq with Fallujah and Mosul, is Israel targeting legitimate military targets, A, and B, has it taken into account the proportional collateral effects if it goes after those targets? There's no prohibition about civilian casualties. Otherwise, you wouldn't have urban conflict. And the studies that were done of American action in Fallujah and Mosul and other places in Iraq and Afghanistan have shown ratios of civilian to military casualties in the range of 5 to 1. In Gaza, by Hamas's own statistics, the range is 2 to 1.
I'll leave you with this. Donald Trump, who's not a peacenik, but also to his credit, he's not a warmonger, said that John Bolton's solution to everything is to bomb people. And that's why he got fired.